Hey guys, this is my guide on climbing Himlung. Himlung Himal has an altitude of 7.126 meters and sits on the border between Nepal and Tibet in the northwestern part of Nepal. It's located in the vicinity of Manaslu, Annapurna and Dhaulagiri, which you can all see from the summit. I summited Himlung in October 2022 as the youngest German to do so. Our expedition was organized by Diamir Erlebnisreisen and led by Jürgen Landmann. Both did a really good job. The guide is going to be split into 3 parts. First the trek to base camp, then the different camps and rotation options, and lastly the equipment I used and recommend for this expedition. In the video's outro will be a listing of all the distances and vertical meters of the trek, as well as the exact equipment I used and recommend, including prices. I'm not affiliated with any company I mention, these are just my experiences and honest opinions. All the footage you will see in the background is my own. The trek normally starts at Koto at 2:06. Due to heavy snow and rain in the weeks prior to our trip, the roads were washed away and we started at Jagat at 900 meters. From there we trekked to Darapani at 1:03 on the first day and then to Koto on day 2. This trek is part of the Annapurna circuit trek, so the tea houses are quite good and the roads are normally quite good as well. On day 3 we left the circuit and continued to Meta at 3:06. The next day we continued to Gyang at 3880, a town which was destroyed and abandoned after the earthquake in 2015. It was rebuilt just a few years ago, so the tea houses are actually quite good, better than at Meta in fact. We took a short hike up a small mountain behind Gyang and enjoyed the view over the valley. Climb high, sleep low. Day 5 took us to the village of Phu, the last settlement before base camp. We used the afternoon to hike up Guru Sangbo, which is close to 48, and gave us our first view of Himlung. The hike is rather short and definitely worth the effort. The next day we had our last day of trekking and finally got to base camp. We started building up the tents and stayed at base camp for 3 days. We hiked around a bit base camp but mostly rested to acclimatize and prepare for our rotations. The camps on Himlung are as follow. Base camp sits at 4850 just next to the moraine. Camp 1 at 5450 on a small plain. Camp 2 at around 6 on the glacier and Camp 3 at 6450 on the summit ridge. From Camp 3 you will have a first good glimpse on Annapurna and Dhaulagiri. Some teams use Camp 2.5, which sits at around 6.1 but is a lot further down the glacier, as you will see on the drone footage. There's also French base camp just beyond the moraine, but hardly anyone uses it as it makes material transport to base camp quite hard. There's a few sections of the climb that are harder or more technical than others. The way over the moraine from base camp to Camp 1 is quite exhausting and the climb out of it is rather tricky and in danger of rockfall. So stay back, use the ropes and don't hurry. The climb behind Camp 1 is quite steep and leads to the bottleneck, a small steep section which had ropes but was hard to climb with 20 plus kilograms in your backpack. Just below Camp 3 is the ice wall, a short steep wall that you will have to climb again. Here we all used our ascenders and figure 8 respectively. The summit push itself has no technical parts. We started off with a puja ceremony with one of the monks of the village from Phu and then did 2 rotations. On our first rotation we took as much gear as possible up to Camp 1, slept there and continued to Camp 2. Here we deposited all of the gear we didn't need lower on the mountain, such as mittens, dried food, thick merino base layers, gas and others. After sleeping at Camp 2 we descended back to base camp and rested for 4 days. This was rather long, but bad weather didn't allow for an early ascent. For our summit push rotation we climbed to and slept at Camp 1, then continued to Camp 2 and on day 3 pushed to Camp 3. Camp 3 sits wonderfully on the summit ridge and is quite exposed. While we shared a tent as 2 lower on the mountain, we were 3 at Camp 3, so it was quite cozy. We went to bed quite early and planned to get up at 4 and start by 5, but heavy wind forced us to delay to 9 AM and 10 AM respectively. The wind had mostly settled and we got to walk in sunlight the whole day. It took us about 7 hours to climb the 700 vertical meters to the summit and about 2 hours to descend back to Camp 3, where we slept for another night. The next day we descended from Camp 3 back to base camp in one push. This was really hard and some members decided to stay at Camp 1 and sleep there. This was understandable, but I forced myself back to base camp. We actually got a cake back at base camp, so it was really worth it. For the trek back, we walked from base camp all the way to Napa Bumi, a small village between Kiang and Meta. From there we took another long day back to Koto and were glad that the roads had been repaired in the meantime, so we could drive back to Kathmandu by jeeps and bus. I'll go over the equipment in order of when and for what I used it. For the trek I used my normal hiking boots. They were category C, but category B would be even better as they are lighter and easier to walk in. Anything above that is really not necessary and will just be uncomfortable and result in blisters. For the hike I used my day pack, a 35-liter backpack, in which I had the following items: a small towel and a second shirt to change in for lunch, a rain jacket and rain pants, as well as some snacks and 2 to 3 liters of water. Remember, drinking plenty is important to help your body acclimatize. I always carried my drone in my backpack because I didn't want to risk it being damaged during transport. For clothing I just wore my hiking pants and a shirt or thin fleece on top. Don't forget a hat, sunglasses and a buff. The sun can be quite intense even during the trek. The equipment you need from base camp onwards will depend on your organization, but I try to make a somewhat comprehensive list. A thin mattress is usually provided, but I brought 2 of my own for the upper camps. A thin foam mattress that goes on the bottom and a good inflatable mattress on top. This together with my down sleeping bag and an inlet was my sleeping system. My sleeping bag was rated to a comfort temperature of -18 degrees centigrade, which was enough for me, but more towards the cold side. For the evening at base camp I recommend using your down pants and jacket, as the temperature will drop to around -10 degrees centigrade as soon as the sun sets. If you have a heated or insulated tent, that may not be necessary, but make sure to have enough warm clothing for base camp as well. For electronics I brought my own small 20-watt solar panel and a power bank to charge my drone, cameras, GoPro, smartphone, etc. Some companies provide a panel or generator, so just ask them. The panel worked out great and produced enough energy to charge the group's cameras with no problems. Our ladder gear, so burners, gas, food, drinks, tents, etc. was provided by the company and we only had to transport it up the mountains for the camp. For the climbing above base camp we used our big boots. These were the Scarpa Phantom 8000 for me. You could use your hiking boots if they can be used with your crampons for the first rotation to save some energy, now that I think about it. As you'll only be climbing during the day, the cold won't be a problem. As we had to transport all of our equipment ourselves, I used my 70-liter backpack, which did a great job. If porters or Sherpas for carrying your equipment are provided, this may not be necessary and your small day pack could be enough. For the hikes between the camps, I used my normal hiking pants, a shirt and a fleece or soft shell. Due to the good weather and the intense sun, it was never really cold. For sleeping at camps I wore my thin merino underwear together with some thick wool socks my grandma made me for this trip. Regarding the summit push, I have to admit that I was really cold, which was mostly due to insufficient warm clothing. I made the summit but didn't feel my toes and fingertips for several hours, so I changed it a bit and tried again on Barunse, another 7,000 meter peak in Nepal the following year. This time I felt a lot warmer, so this is what I would recommend. I always wear 2 pairs of socks, thin merino layer socks and really warm merino socks. That together with 260 merino wool long johns serves as my base layer. Above that I wear my big down pants for insulation. On my Himlung summit climb I only wore thin wool insulated pants, which was not enough at all. Above that I will wear hardshell pants if it's really windy, if not I will leave it at camp unless there's maybe some wind later on, then I'll just throw them into my backpack. For boots I would definitely go for a 8000 meter model, as Himlung tends to be quite windy and cold. If you tend to have cold feet, try out heat packs or heated soles. The Scarpa Phantom 8000 even comes with heated soles in its newest version. For my upper body I start with a 260 merino wool turtleneck sweater and a merino wool buff. Above that I will wear my fleece and a softshell jacket. The last layer will be my down jacket unless it's really windy. In that case, I will put my hardshell jacket as my outer layer. For gloves I would recommend wearing thin merino layers and a good mitten like the Black Diamond Absolutes. I have the mountain equipment redline mittens, but found them to be a bit too thin, especially on the thumbs. Again, if you tend to have cold hands, get some heat packs, they're really worth it. For the head, I recommend wearing either a warm wool hat or a balaclava together with the aforementioned merino buff. As it was quite windy on our summit push, we started off with ski goggles and wore them for the whole climb. If there's no wind, bring sunglasses to shield your eyes from the intense sun. Bring a good headlamp for the climb if you plan to start during the early morning hours. I've always used the Petzl Active Core and still think it's one of the best on the market. I brought a few snacks to eat, but only ate a few bits during the climb. A good insulated bottle is worth gold. I used an old one and had lukewarm tea on the summit. Not good. The one I bought since served me well and can only recommend it. For photos and videos, I recommend bringing a small point and shoot camera for the mountain. Bigger cameras take good pictures, but the cold will kill the batteries. With these small cameras, you can put them in the down jacket, shoot a few pictures and put them back in. I carried my drone up the summit, but felt so weak I didn't even bother taking it out. Sorry guys, no footage from the summit. If you have any questions regarding the equipment or felt that I left out an important part, feel free to comment and I'll do my best to answer your questions. That's it from me guys, have fun in the mountains.